is fun and awesome. And I want to remind everybody today, too, I forgot to mention it in my announcements, but because it's Promotion Sunday, we have Promotion Sundays, get what we did there, downstairs. So everybody gets free ice cream. So when you leave, okay, don't forget to go down to the basement. There's free ice cream sundaes downstairs. Get you some ice cream. You've all deserved it, okay? You've all worked out enough this week. It's time to eat some ice cream, okay? And so we've got that downstairs, so we hope you guys will enjoy that after service. I want to start this morning by showing you a picture, okay? This is very, very important. I want to clear up some debates that maybe you've had, and here's the picture I want to show you. So this is Michael Jordan, okay? 1998 NBA Finals, taking his final shot. You might remember this. It was just above the free throw line, okay? I remember watching this as a kid live against the Utah Jazz that could never win a championship. Anyway, but notice everybody's face. Everybody's watching Michael. Everybody's watching the ball because, I mean, he's the greatest of all time, right? Michael Jordan is the GOAT. There's no debating that. And then I want to show you the third greatest basketball player of all time, okay? This is some guy named LeBron James, okay, who thinks he's the GOAT, but he's not, okay, because he's behind Kobe. Anyway, but here he is taking this is when he broke the all-time scoring record in this last year, right? Now, here's what I want you to look at. Look at the fans. You see the difference? Look at, in 1998, everybody's got their eyes on the ball or on Michael. And here, you can see it better on the big screen. Everybody's got their phone out. Everybody has got their phone out. Everybody is viewing this experience through their screen. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to debate whether one is better than the other, okay? But this is the reality of the world that we live in. You could literally be there in person experiencing this, but people would rather choose to view that moment through their phone and capture it and record it than to put their phone down and to see it through their own eyes. Isn't that interesting? There's a lot of interesting things like that are happening. But the question that we have to wrestle with when we view these things as a society is we have to ask ourselves, but are we better for it? Technology is here. Screens won. They're not going anywhere. But we have to wrestle with the question, are we better for it? And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. If you're just joining us, we have been in a series called Burnout Society. And we've been talking about burnout because every single one of us has dealt with burnout at one time or another. Empty nesters deal with burnout. Retired people deal with burnout. Parents, young adults, teens, singles, all of us have dealt with burnout at a different level. And our working definition for burnout has been this. Burnout is when our soul can no longer bear the weight of your life. When your soul can no longer bear the weight of your life, it's just that time where you're like, I'm done, I'm tired, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm just exhausted, I don't know how much more I can do, I'm feeling burnt out. And the reason that we're feeling this, the reason that how when we talk about it, we're all like, oh yeah, I felt that, oh yeah, I can relate to that. The reason is because we are so overwhelmed by possibility. We live in a world today where there are no ceilings. It's an endless world of endless possibilities. Because of technology, we can push the limits, we can push the boundaries of what we do with our time, what we do with our finances, what we do with our schedules. We can be multiple places at once. We can do so many different things. As a matter of fact, I went to a conference in Atlanta about a month and a half ago, and they talked about there's this new trend among older millennials, people between the ages of like late 30s, early 40s, where they're seeing a wave of these older millennials going back to school, going back to college. Because they've decided they've already been to college once, they have a degree, some of them even have maybe even a master's, and they've just decided after 2 decades, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. Turns out I've spent, 12 years, 15 years, 20 years doing this, and guess what? I don't want to do it anymore. And they're actually going back to school. So there's this brand new market for educational institutions for not like kids that are graduating, but like they're actually doing some marketing towards millennials. Like, hey, are you fed up? Are you burnt up? Are you done? Well, go back to school and learn a new thing. As a matter of fact, this is a crazy stat. 43% of those under 40 have considered going back to school. And some of you, you fit that demographic. You fit that statistic. Some of you are going back to school right now. Somebody grabbed me after first service and was like, you were talking about me, because that's what I'm actually going through right now. And so it's amazing. But it speaks so much to this conversation, because here's what it tells us. Number one, people are experiencing burnout. Number two, it speaks to the fact of what we just said. There are no ceilings. As one author put it, we are living in a world without fixed destinies, where you can go back to school 20 years later. You can totally change your career. You can get a new degree. You can change whatever road that you're on. But here's the thing. With there being no ceilings, with there not being a fixed destiny and so many possibilities, we have fear that is driving us. And here's why fear is driving us. It's our fear of underperforming that has actually made us so overwhelmed. Because some of us have experienced this. You've done the same thing for the last 5, 10, 15 years, and you're going, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. I think I'm destined for more than just to do this or to be that. And I don't want to do that. And I don't want to follow that traditional path. And I don't want, because I want to be more, and I want to be great, and I want to be awesome, and I want all the experiences. And so that it's that fear that is sometimes causing us to overschedule ourselves, overcommit ourselves, overexert ourselves, overspend our bank accounts, because we have this fear of not being enough, and we've got to reach our full potential, maybe even possibly beyond that. But that's why we're experiencing burnout. But here's the thing, we've been playing with a new idea, okay? So kind of the seed that we've planted that has crossed through this is this idea right here. Less is more. Say it with me. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Less is more. Instead of trying to do it all and to be it all and to be the best at it all, possibly maybe what we all need is less. That less is more. Maybe that's a mindset that we need to adopt. And kind of the answer or the prescription for burnout is this thing right here, margin. What we all need is space between our current pace and our limits. And so we've been going through week by week talking about a typical area that we see burnout happen. And last week we talked about the benefits of a Sabbath. And we talked about the law of the Sabbath and the law of gleaning, where when Jesus, he told the Israelites that when they were harvesting their fields, the law of gleaning said that you should leave an area or leave a border, and you can't go through your fields more than once, because you need to not push yourself to the limits. You always need to leave margin, or what we talked about was breathing room. And we talked about how the ancient art of Sabbath, we don't have to do it because that's the law and we're not under the Old Testament law, but it's still good for us because it creates breathing room. And what we all really need is not so much rest, but restoration. We all need time to be able to fill our soul back up, and we need that restoration that can only come from God. And so last week we practiced that. We literally didn't have service. We actually do this 3 times a year, Memorial Day weekend, Labor Day weekend, and the weekend after Christmas. We don't have any services because we want all of you to have a Sunday, to have a real Sabbath, and to experience that restoration. And I hope you all enjoyed your day last week. Actually, that pastor that I was just talking about, so that was the Sunday, it was before that Sunday when we were off. He goes, "What are you preaching about this week?" I said, "I'm not preaching." He goes, "Oh, are you taking a vacation?" I said, "No, we're not having service." He goes, "What do you mean you're not having service? You can do that?" I said, "I can do whatever I want. I'm the pastor." No, I didn't say that. I said, "But no, we're not doing that." He goes, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm taking my family to a splatter room." He goes, "Oh, wow. I didn't know you could do that. I'm going to talk to my board about that." I said, "Good luck to you." It took my board 10 years to adopt this. But anyway, 10 years in a pandemic to get them to understand this is okay. But anyway, we talked about Sabbath, right? We talked about we need time to restore our soul last week. Well, today I want to talk to you about screens. I want to talk to you about screens and social media because all of this is playing an effect on us. Now, Gen Z is the most plugged in generation. They don't know a time without the internet. And I don't want to sound like an old millennial, but I remember a time when there was no internet. And I know that because I remember the sound the internet made. Does everybody remember that, right? Right? And then your mom, remember when you'd be like, trying to get on the internet and your mom would pick up the phone? Because it's always about your phone line, right? Your landline. So your mom would get on the phone, it'd screw up your internet connection, you'd be yelling from the basement, "Mom, get off the internet! Trying to AOL chat with my girlfriend," all right? And so, you'd have to tell her to get off the internet and stuff. Nobody could be on the phone or anything like that. I remember the very first trailer I ever downloaded and watched. We went over to my dad. He was a pastor. We had a lunch at somebody's house, and they said, "Hey, I just got internet. You guys go have a blast." And we're like, "What's the internet?" And they're like, "Oh, just go in this bar and put in yahoo.com." Remember when Yahoo was like the end-all, be-all, right? And so I went to yahoo.com, and they had a headline at the top, and it was 1999. The first X-Men trailer had just come out, okay? And I was like, ooh, X-Men, I love X-Men. And so I clicked it to download the trailer. 3 hours later, 2-minute trailer, took me 3 hours to download it. I watched it frame by frame, my introduction to Hugh Jackman. And now we're getting Deadpool and Wolverine. Anyway, but I watched this trailer 3 hours later. I watched it frame by frame download. And every time it downloaded another percent, I'd hit the play button and watch a couple more seconds of it. And I watched it in 360p. You kids have no idea. You're 4K. I had to watch blurred images of Hugh Jackman when I was growing up. Anyway, but I remember that. But now, the internet, we have a computer in our pocket, right? It's unbelievable. It's amazing what we're able to do and the speeds that we have and stuff. But here's the thing. When the internet came out, when Al Gore invented it, anyway, and the internet came out, the promise of the internet was that it was going to connect us. But here's the thing. We're actually seeing today, after we've had almost more than 2 decades of the internet, we're finding that it's actually not something that's connecting us, it's actually disconnecting us. And we are in the middle, as America, in our country, we are experiencing the biggest mental health crisis we have ever seen as a country. And so we need to start to pay attention, and we need to start asking some questions as a society of is this good? Some staggering statistics, and there's going to be a lot today. This is going to be like drinking from a fire hydrant. But teenagers today, this is just some of the statistics. Depression and anxiety in teens is at an all-time high. We're seeing more teenagers and more preteens having to go to counseling, having to be medicated for anxiety and depression and having an experience of panic attack than we've ever seen before. Suicide rate. This is the first time in history where the suicide rate is actually higher than the homicide rate. And then 12th graders today are going out less than 8th graders did a decade ago. Now, here's some good news. Teen pregnancies are declining rapidly. But do you know why they're declining rapidly? Because these kids don't know how to be social. They're losing their social skills. Drunk driving is declining, which is great. But actually, it's not changing the rate of accidents that teenagers and young people are in. You know why? Because it's not that they're drinking and driving, it's that they're texting or they're Snapchatting and driving. So we're seeing something happen just socially among teenagers where we're having this epidemic of a mental health issue. One article that I read, this is what they said. The devices that we place in our teens' hands to keep them safe when they're out and about, never mind the fact that they aren't going out and about anymore, is actually slowly killing them inside. One crazy statistic, they went on college campuses and they asked college kids, they asked them this question right here. Which would you rather have, a broken phone screen or a broken finger? Guess what 9 out of 10 college kids on multiple college campuses said? Take my finger. Isn't that incredible? That if you went up to a young person and you're like, I'm going to break your screen or I'm going to break your finger, they'd be like, I got 2 of them. Go ahead. I got this one still and I only need one. 90% said broken finger. So we're seeing signs of something else start to come about with these screens. But it's not just Gen Z. It's not just the kids. Millennials are also having issues as well. Gen Z self-reported that they are averaging 10 hours a day of screen time. And millennials average 7 hours and 4 minutes a day. And on average, people who spend 44% of their waking hours are actually looking at a screen. These are staggering statistics. We're seeing all kinds of things change and data that's finally starting to come out that we can understand and we can utilize and we can ask questions. And the question that we all need to face is, are we better for it? Are we better for it? Sean Parker, he was one of the founders of Facebook. If you remember the movie Social Media, he was Justin Timberlake. Remember that movie? So they did a movie about Facebook and how it came about and everything else. And Justin Timberlake, he plays Sean Parker. He's the guy who also invented Napster. He was a hacker. He was a college-age hacker, and he invented Napster and sold that, and then he was one of the founders of Facebook. He's done a complete 180 on his beliefs about social media, and he recently did an interview, and this is what he said. It's a little long, but stick with me. God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains. The thought process that went into these platforms, Facebook being the very first of them, was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And he says this. He says that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever, and that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you more likes and more comments. And then this is what he says. And it's a social validation feedback loop. Exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. Now, I want to explain to you a little bit of what he's talking about and how it pertains to screens when he talks about that dopamine hit. You know, when I grew up, I remember learning, when we talked about depression and what depression was, we always talked about how depression was something that you have, right? You have depression. And we talked about it being a chemical imbalance. And that you may need, like a medication in order to balance those chemicals, that was almost the only way to fix it. And we also talked about how it was hereditary. So we talked about how they had found certain genes that were linked to depression. So if your father or your mother had depression, it was very likely that you were going to have depression too. That's how we used to talk about depression. In the last 5 years, they've done significant studies and data on depression, and they're actually changing how they talk about it. And they're talking about how depression is not something you have, but it's rather a symptom of something else that you have. So this is kind of the thought process that psychologists work with today. Depression is a symptom of your body telling you that something is wrong with your environment. So kind of like pain. Pain is not something you have. Pain is a symptom of your body telling you, you touched a hot stove, idiot. Put your hand off of that, right? I mean, that's what pain is. It's a signal. It's a symptom. It's your body trying to communicate to you that something is wrong. They are saying now that depression is in the same vein, that it's a symptom of something else, whether that's undealt with trauma or something you haven't processed, but it could be other things as well. So now here's how this relates to screens. I want to show you this little fun image. This is a thing called homeostasis, okay? And now, homeostasis, and what happens with homeostasis is in your brain, the place where pain and pleasure take place, those are the same places, okay? So pain and pleasure are happening in the very same place. And every time you experience pleasure, which is dopamine, you get a hit of dopamine. And so you start to feel good, right? You start to feel relaxed, you start to feel good, you start to feel excited, you start to feel happy. That's dopamine. Now, here's what happens and how that relates to screens, what Sean Parker was saying. Sean Parker, what they discovered was the power of the like button and the comment. So every time that you look on your phone and you post something and you get a like or you get a heart or you get a laugh emoji or you get a comment, guess what happens in your brain? Dopamine, 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 dopamine. Pleasure, 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 pleasure. Remember Bruce Almighty? Pleasure, 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 right? So every time, that's what you get. Or if you're watching like YouTube shorts or TikToks, you see a TikTok you like. Ha, dopamine. Scroll again. Let's do another one. Nope, don't like that one. Go again. Oh, that's funny. Dopamine, 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 dopamine. So continually in these apps, and any of them can be included in it, you're getting a dopamine hit and you're feeling good. Now here's what happens in homeostasis. What comes up has to come down. What gets hot has to be cooled off. Homeostasis is always trying to keep those things in balance because too much pleasure, that's not good. Too much pain, that's not good either. So your body and your brain are always trying to balance these out in homeostasis. So guess what happens? You're on your phone and you spend 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, and you're getting dopamine, 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 dopamine. Then you finally put your phone down. And guess what happens? Your brain releases other chemicals to try to bring you down. Have you ever been off your phone for a while and you started to just feel off? Started to feel bored? Started to feel kind of fidgety, kind of irritated, kind of, like, I don't know. I mean, I know there's a TV show on right now, or I know I'm having dinner with people, but and you just reach for your phone and you open it up and you just start scrolling. And somebody could even ask you, what are you doing on your phone? Nothing. I'm just on Facebook. Nothing. I'm just on Snapchat. Nothing. I'm just on Instagram. Yeah, but what are you doing? Nothing. And you think it's nothing. But here's what's actually happening. You're starting to come down from your high. And so your brain is reaching for more dopamine. See, one author that I read, one study said, this is why screens are the new cigarette. I've never smoked before. I don't know if you've had, but I know people who do. And here's the thing. They start to come off their high, and they got to step outside and, get a smoke break. I've had people who have tattooed me, and they start to get a little fidgety with that gun, and I go, you got to go outside. You know what I mean? And they do. They go outside, they have a smoke, they calm down, and then they come back, and here we go again, right? So that's what's happening. And the same kind of thing is happening with our screens. Watch next time you're in a meeting. You ever be in a board meeting or a big meeting with people and everybody's listening? Some people aren't, but some people are listening. And here's what happens. Everybody stands up. And what does everybody do? Okay, see you next week. Everybody's got to get their phone out. Everybody's got to check something. What? None of us really know. But what's happening is we all need a hit because we've had enough time away from our phone that we need to do that. So what we're actually seeing happen is that people are going through something. They're going through this change chemically, literally in their brain. And what some people are facing is addiction. And here's the crazy part too, what happens in the human body. Your body naturally produces dopamine on its own. However, if dopamine starts to be stimulated from an auxiliary device, what happens is your body will actually stop producing dopamine on its own, and it will start to depend on the auxiliary device that you're using to stimulate yourself in order to create that dopamine. Just like caffeine, you know how your body can get used to caffeine, and then all of a sudden it's like now us adults who wake up and we have to have a cup of coffee to function. And now some of us, we're at the point, I need 4 cups of coffee to function, okay? Same thing that happens in our bodies. Our bodies can actually stop producing dopamine if it is stimulated from an auxiliary device for too long. This is a list of symptoms that a lot of people, millennials or even young adults, are experiencing today. Anxiety, insomnia, irritability, depression, cravings, fatigue. Millennials and adults are stepping up, even going to see doctor and going, I don't know what's wrong with me. I've been having these cravings. I've been eating late at night. I've been putting on weight. Now I'm having trouble sleeping. I've been very irritable, kind of fidgety. My kids will say something and I'm a little sharp and I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling all these things. And I don't know what's wrong with me. And you know what all of this is? This list of symptoms, do you know what this is all related to? It's withdrawal symptoms, guys. These are all withdrawal symptoms from drugs. But what psychologists are seeing today is this is a list of withdrawal symptoms from your phone. Because if you step away from your phone long enough, if you're addicted, you will start to feel the same withdrawal symptoms as you do from a drug, because the dopamine, or you're being doped by your phone, is the exact same thing. One researcher I read said this is the problem. We are in a global state of digital withdrawal. We are living in a world and we are living in a country where part of the irritability, part of the angst, part of the depression, part of the mental health crisis, it is all related to our screens and the social media apps, because they were literally created to dope us up. Johann Hari, he wrote a book about depression, and he said that there are 9 causes of depression, and he called them disconnections, things that are actually creating the symptom of depression. And I'll sum up the book for you in one word. He says that depression equals disconnection. That depression is not something you have. It is a symptom of some sort of disconnection that is occurring in your environment or in your life. And he lists some of those disconnections right here. He says some of the disconnections could be, go to that next slide for me. It could be meaningful work, other people, meaningful values. Could be childhood trauma that you haven't dealt with, status and respect, disconnection from the natural world, or disconnection and feeling like you don't have a secure future. All of these things are disconnections that sometimes occur, and these are the things that cause the symptom of depression. And he states in his book that he believes that social media and screens are what's disconnecting us from these very important things. What do we do with that? This is heavy. This is alarming. This is somewhat scary when you start to look at it all. And trust me, there's a whole lot more data that I had to take out of my sermon because we don't got all day, right? But man, what do we do? Well, here's the thing. When we open up the Bible, when we look at Scripture, when we look at the teachings of Jesus, here's the bad news. Jesus never addressed screens, okay? Wasn't on the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus said, thou shalt only have 5 hours of screen time a day, okay? He never said anything about that. Now, here's the one thing that we know for certain, that Jesus would have definitely been an iPhone user instead of an Android, because everybody hates that green bubble in the chat, okay? All of you people who are literally ruining my text groups, all right, with your green bubble, get out of there, okay? I can't send a photo to all of you because you Android users you're ruining it. But anyway, but although we don't have any teachings of Jesus to draw on or to lean on to help us deal with this, we do have something that comes from the Apostle Paul that we can relate to this situation. Now, Paul, he was an apostle. He was a Pharisee turned Jesus follower. He was a big part of the movement of Christianity in the first church, and he was a church planner himself, and he goes and he writes all of these letters. Well, he writes a letter to the church in Corinth. We have 2 of them in our Old Testament, 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. And he writes a letter. Now, he's talking to them about sexual integrity. Because, as you know, the Israelites and the descendants of Abraham, they were under the Old Covenant. And so they followed 613 laws. But then Jesus comes. He makes a new covenant, love God and love other people. And those became obsolete. And so, you know, these people, these new followers of Jesus are like, okay, cool. So like 613 laws, those are out the window. Love God, love Jesus. So basically, we can do whatever we want. As long as we love God and love people, we're good. So there was all this gray area and stuff. And so the church in Corinth kind of went nuts, okay? And so Paul was like, like, no, you can't date your sister, all right? So like, I gotta write a letter about this, all right? And so he writes this letter to address this, and what he says, the principle of it, can be applied to what we're talking about today. So I don't want to take this out of context, okay? But it can be applied to what we're talking about today. So this is what he says to him. Paul writes him, and he says, you say, I have the right to do anything. He says, I know what you guys are thinking. I know what you're saying. Well, there's no law. There's no verse. Jesus never talked about that. So I can do it, right? Paul goes, you say that. You say, I have the right to do anything I want. And Paul says this. He says, you say, I have the right to do anything. But not everything is beneficial. Not everything's beneficial. Let me sum this up for you. This is what Paul's trying to say. You say, I have the right to do anything, but that does not mean I should do everything. There's not a verse on that. There's not a law on that. There's not a rule on that. I get that. But just because you have the right to do anything does not mean that you should do everything. Here's the question that we have to wrestle with. Is your phone beneficial for you right now? Remember, we always ask this question around here. What's the wise thing to do? In light of my past experiences, my current circumstances, and my future hopes and dreams, what's the wise thing for me to do? Not what everybody else is doing, but what is the wise thing for me to do? Ask yourself this question. Is your phone beneficial for you? There are a ton of things I love about my phone. Texting, the greatest invention that millennials ever had. Texting. We gave the world this gift, and it is beautiful, okay? I am a texting machine. It is how I keep up with my friends, and I am the GIF master. And yes, it's called a GIF because it's a graphic. Don't argue with me, okay? But I am great at GIFs, okay? If you text me, we will GIF all day, okay? I love it. I love texting. It's how I stay connected to my friends. I don't always have time for phone calls, although I love phone calls, and I will text all day and all night. And then FaceTime. I have 3 nieces. I am a girl unk, okay? And I love being an uncle, and I love my 3 nieces. One of them was actually here in first service today, and I love those girls, and I don't get to see them. I might go a year to a year and a half with actually getting to physically see my nieces, but I'm so connected to them. You know why? Because of FaceTime. And I FaceTime these girls about every other day. My nieces on my sister's side, there's 2 of them. One of them's under 2. The other one's about to start kindergarten. She just lost her 3rd tooth. We will FaceTime literally. And now my little one, Chloe, Coco is what we call her. She's learned my name a little bit, and she goes, Uncle, where are you? It is the best thing in the world to get that video text that says, Uncle, where are you? And I get to FaceTime my niece. I love that. I love cinematography and photography. I shoot videos all the time because I love it. I do it for our gym, I do it for our church, and I have no problem with it because I love cinematography, and I have this awesome 4K camera in my pocket, and I literally edit all the videos on. I mean, that's great. Now, with all that said, though, there are other things that are not good. Like, for instance, my wife, Kate, and I mean, kids go to bed about 9 o'clock, or at least they're in their bed. Good Lord. And we sit down and we watch a show together. And so we'll turn on a show. But what happens most nights is we turn a show on and then we both get our phones out. And this is our time to connect with one another. We've been all day, we've been working, we've been parenting, we've been doing all kinds of stuff. And this is supposed to be our couple hours to connect with one another. And I'll be honest with you, there'll be times where I'll look up and I'll realize we're not even watching the show that's on the TV. She's playing Monopoly Go, stupidest game ever created, in my opinion. And I'm on Facebook, and then I'm on Twitter, and I'm like, what are we doing? We're supposed to be spending time together. We're not talking. We're not laughing at this. We're not even watching the same movie. What are we doing? There's other times where I'll be out to dinner with somebody. I'll be sitting with somebody. Sometimes even at church or out to dinner with somebody, and we're sitting and we're supposed to be, this is our time to connect. We're friends. We're supposed to be talking to one another. And I look across the table, and this is what the other person's doing. And I'm like, what's up? I'm supposed to be spending time with this person, and it looks like that they are more interested in their virtual reality on their phone than the reality of the people that we're supposed to be in community with. Kind of bothers me. Kind of bugs me. Kind of makes me going to go, well, okay, I'll just leave. Ever done that at a family event, Sometimes at Christmas or something like that, you're supposed to be, hey, we haven't seen each other in a long time. We've really missed you. And what does everybody do? Everybody's on their couch on their phone. Well, it really seems like we missed each other, right? Like, is that really good? Is that getting us to the preferred future that we really want? I think we all have to stop and ask ourselves that question and wrestle with it. Then Paul says this, I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. You say, I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything.
Paul's point was this: you're right, you do have the right to do anything. There's not a law for that, there's not a verse for that, there's not a rule against that. But you should not be mastered by anything. You should not be a slave to anything. Let me ask you a question. Are you mastered by your phone? Now, if I asked you this question and I gave you a microphone, I said, all right, we're going to all go around the room and answer this. You say, no, I'm not mastered by anything. I'm in charge of me. This phone doesn't tell me what to do. Okay, so let me ask you some other questions. What's the first thing you look at when you wake up in the morning? What's the last thing you look at before you go to bed? You ever pull this thing out? Sometimes you don't even know why. Like it's mindless. Where you just pick it up and you just start scrolling because you can't sit still. Or you can't just be in the room with other people. Or you finished your dinner and you're waiting on everybody else to finish and you don't know what to do with yourself, and so you just pick up your phone and start scrolling. You ever stand by yourself in a line or something and you can't just stand there? You got to pull out your phone and you just start scrolling. If somebody asked you, what are you doing? You'd say, nothing. I don't know. Just scrolling. You ever use this to calm you down? You ever use this to make you happy? You ever use this to change your mood? You ever post something and you see you got some likes and some comments and then you end up refreshing? You notice it's been a minute and you refresh and you refresh and you refresh to see if you got some more comments or you got some more likes. Or even sometimes, a good debate will start, right? And you just start keeping it going. We got to keep this going. We got to keep this going because there's something that feels good about this or something that feels right about this. Even though it's a little bit of tension, maybe even a little bit of angst, we got to keep this thing going. You ever do that? Because what's happening in your brain is dopamine, 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 dopamine. Here's the thing. If you ever find yourself doing that and you don't understand why, if you ever find yourself doing that to bring about pleasure in your life, Jesus didn't preach about screens, but if Jesus heard that kind of description of a device or something that you use to feel different or to feel better or to bring about that kind of experience, Jesus would go, oh yeah, no, I do actually have a word for that. That's called an idol. No, yeah, we know what that is. That's called a false god that you've become a slave to, that you need, that you've become reliant on. Yeah, we call those gods, and that's a false god. Because here's the thing about false gods. Here's where psychology and Jesus would agree. A false god never comes through for you like the real God. And psychology would say, oh yeah, this thing isn't making you better. This thing is actually making us sicker. It's funny, right? You'll get on Instagram and you'll see a video or you'll see a reel about depression or anxiety and what you need to do about it. Isn't it funny, the audacity of this thing to tell you you have a problem with anxiety or depression when it's the thing that's causing the anxiety or the depression? Jesus would say, that's a false god. And you're actually more mastered by it than you know. So what do we do? What do we need to do for our kids? What do we need to do for ourselves? What do we need to do for the safety of our own mental and physical and spiritual health? Well, the answer is the same, guys. We all need margin. We need margin. We need limits. We need space between our current pace and our limits. And here's the crazy thing. Psychologists have actually all agreed on the type of margins we need to have with our social media and our screens. And this is what they are prescribing to people to keep this in balance. They say that what you need to do is you need to be phone free 1 hour a day, 1 day a week, and 1 week a year. Now again, if you hear that and you start to twitch out, that's a sign, you tweaker, okay? You have a problem. If I told you, hey, everybody go home and nobody pick up your cell phone, everybody turn it off, and you couldn't do it, that's a problem. Could you do this?
Could you pick one day a week? 1 hour a day, I think most of us could do, but could you pick one day a week? Could you go 1 week a year? Could you go on vacation and for the love of Pete, not post a photo? Could you? Or would you need that social media validation feedback? Would you need that dopamine to actually enjoy the experience? Could you do it? Here's the thing. We have spent a lot of time on this topic, our staff. We've done a lot of talking to people. We've done a lot of studying on this. And we think this is a real issue because we even see it around here. And so there are a couple things that we are even going to change and adapt here to try to help this because we think this is a huge crisis. One of those things we're going to do is our children and youth environments are going to be screen-free environments. So if you bring your kid with their tablet to church, if you bring your kid with their cell phone and all that stuff, we ask you, number one, if you can, please don't do that. This is time to be in community with one another. It's not time to be on screens. But if they do, we understand sometimes you get here early or something. We will have a basket where we will take that and we'll give it back to them at the end. Same with youth group. When you get here at youth group, there'll be a little tub on the table, and teens, we're going to ask you to not be on your phones, and we're going to have a place where you put on your phones. Now, here's the thing. I know this is going to happen. Some of you are going to get in your car, and your teen is going to have a conniption fit. Okay? And they're going to be like, that's it. I'm not going to youth group anymore. You better take my phones from me. Here's the thing, all right? If that happens, parents, work with me here, okay? If that happens, parents, with your kid or your teen, pay attention to that tension. Because if that is what happens, let me tell you something. That's exactly what addicts do when you take their drug from them. They get mad. They fight back. And if that's what it causes, or if that's what you hear when you get in the car, oh, you got a problem. And you can either deal with it now, or you can deal with it when they have to get a full-time job or go to college and actually be focused and nobody's telling them to focus, and you've spent all that money and you want them to live on their own and be functioning adults, and then they have a boss or a college or somebody else telling them, look, you need to be off your screens, and they can't do it themselves. You need to help them while you still have influence in their life. That's what I'm telling you. But hey, teens, don't worry, because the adults are just as bad. How many of us, we walk into this room, in this space, and we go find a seat, and what do we do? Because whatever's on that screen is boring after 20 seconds, right? And so we'll sit here and we do this. We're here to be in community with one another, but we'll do it. Even at our daddy-daughter dance, I noticed this year because I was researching this in the middle. At our daddy-daughter dance and our mother-son events, it was supposed to be an experience that we're supposed to be connecting our mothers and our sons and our daddies and our daughters. And at the daddy-daughter dance, there were girls that were all right here in this very floor dancing around and doing all this stuff, and there were dads on the side on their phones. And at the mother-son event, there was a time when the mothers and sons were supposed to be building Legos together. And these kids are sitting there building these Legos, and it's supposed to be time to talk and connect with one another. And while these kids are building these Legos, and it's supposed to be a time, there are mothers on Facebook. Guys, do we want the memories that our kids have for when they looked up and they wanted to lock eyes with us and they wanted to have a conversation? Do we want to be what they remember is that we said, hold on, I'm on my phone. Wait a minute, I need to finish this post. Is that what we want them to remember? Come on. We as adults need to be better about this too. We as adults need to work on being connected and not being a slave to these devices. Here's the thing. If you are experiencing any of this, it is possible that your phone is what's causing it. And that's not what God intended for you in your life. What God wants for you is this. God wants you to have meaningful work. He wants you to have relationships with other people. He wants you to have meaningful values. He wants you to deal with your childhood trauma and work through it. He wants you to have status and respect. He wants you to enjoy the natural world, and he wants you to have a secure future. He wants to give you all of this. He wants you to have a life, and he wants you to be better at life. But your phone and your social media,
just might be stealing some of this from you. So here's the crazy thing that probably nobody else is talking about this morning. One of the most spiritual things you could do, one of the healthiest things you could do this week, is find a way to find margin between you and your phone. Not pray a special prayer, not go to a special service, but one of the most spiritual things you could do this week is start to develop margin in your household between your screens and yourself. One of the most spiritual things you could do is start to have difficult conversations with your kids about their screens and their video games and their apps and say, hey, we need to create some margin in your life. I've started to have it with my kids. My kids, the first thing they do in the morning is grab their cell phones. And I've had to develop new rules and new conversations to go, no, we're done with screen time. We're not doing this. We're at the dinner table. Don't you dare turn on that TV. Don't you dare get on YouTube. Don't you dare do this. Well, we're not doing that. And trust me, I know as a parent, when you start to get that kickback, it's real easy to go, I don't want to deal with this, right? But you got to this is one of the best things you could possibly do, though, for your family and for their future. So, what are you going to do? How are you going to respond to this? What are you going to do for yourself? Maybe this morning, God, it's so crazy. I can't believe we're even saying this. It's 2024, though, but it's the weirdest thing. I never thought this would come out of my mouth as a pastor. Maybe this morning, God is calling some of us to repent of how we've used our screen time. Because maybe, just maybe, this device is become an idol and is actually killing us on the inside. Something to think about, something to wrestle with, attention that's worth paying attention to. Let me pray for you this morning. Father God, I know this is a wild conversation. But God, maybe this morning there's some truth to this and we feel that in our soul. We feel like, man, dude, I think he's talking about me. I think he's talking about what I'm going through. I think he's talking about what I'm dealing with. I've had some of that, and I've felt some of that. And you know what? Yeah, I need to manage this better because I find myself doing that. God, if that's us, will you help us to have the strength and the courage to face that, to pay attention to the tension, to be willing to have that difficult conversation, to be willing to maybe set some boundaries for myself, to create some margin in my life. God, because some of us, that's exactly what we need. It's not about what everybody else is doing. It's not about what all the other kids are doing. It's not about the norm. It's about, for me, what does my margin need to look like so that I can have the kind of life that you want me to live, and my kids to live, and my family to have. God, help me to be connected to your will and to your way. In your name we pray. Amen. The band's going to come back and we're going to sing one last song together. And as bad as this conversation